Subtraction can be a concept that is a bit problematic to lots of learners, especially those of you in the younger grades. Today I'm going to show you one example of subtraction. Hopefully you will be able to use this in order to perform subtraction, especially when it comes to long division where subtraction is a necessity. If I look at a problem like this, the first thing that I need to understand, starting on my right hand side, is the digit over here is the units column, the tens, the hundreds, the thousands, and so on. Now, keeping that in mind that I have units and I'm using the decimal number system, what I have to understand here is a bigger number subtracted by a smaller number will give me an answer, but a smaller number subtracting a bigger number is problematic. For instance, if I have to go and use a scenario like, for example, 7 minus 5, the answer is 2. On the other hand, if I have 5 minus 7, we know that the answer is negative 2. But in terms of subtraction like this, and especially at the level that you are, that is not something that you want to exercise at the moment. If I look at a problem like this, and I go starting off on my extreme right, this will be the normal starting off position. Look at the units on its own. I have a 6 minus a 5. Now 6 minus 5 immediately gives me the answer, which is 1. If I go on to the next digit, this is the tens column. I notice I have a 1 minus a 2. Now straight away 1 minus 2 I cannot do. I cannot perform that operation, which means something needs to be done to this one. And this is where the concept of borrowing comes in. Because I'm dealing with the decimal number system, whenever I borrow, I am going to borrow 10. The base is 10, so I'm going to be borrowing 10. Now the concept here is quite simple. 1 minus 2 I cannot do. So this one, he says, hey, I need to go to my neighbor to borrow something. So off goes the one. He goes to his neighbor. He goes to his neighbor and says, hey, I need to borrow. The neighbor has enough to lend him, and the neighbor lends him. But when the neighbor lends this digit, he does not lend him a 1. He lends him a 10. 10 plus 1 is actually an 11. 11 minus 2 gives me an answer here of 9. Because this 3 had lent something away, it is no longer 3, it now becomes 2. If I go further with the 2, I will now say 2 minus 1. And 2 minus 1 gives me an answer of 1. No problem. I go to the next digit. This is a 0. 0 minus 2 is problematic. I cannot use 0 minus 2. So this 0 needs to borrow. But this 0 goes to his neighbor and says, hey, I need to borrow. But the neighbor says, oh, I have nothing. But wait a second, I can help you. The neighbor goes to the next digit and borrows. He borrows what? He borrows a 10. Because he borrowed a 10 and this has lent, it now becomes a 2. Now this guy has something. This gentleman goes back and says, hey, you've got something now. May I borrow? And obviously he lends him. He lends him what? He lends him a 10. Because he lent him something, this now lowers by 1 and becomes a 9. 10 minus 2 is equal to 8. This is a 9. 9 minus 1 is equal to 8. Going down here, 2. 2 minus 4 I cannot do. So this whole borrowing process begins again. 2 goes to the 0 and says, hey, I need to borrow something. But unfortunately, this 0 has nothing. But being a kind-hearted 0, he goes to the next guy and says, I need to borrow. Borrow what? I need to borrow 10. Make sure you understand that because he has lent, he now becomes an 8. The 2 can go back to the 10 and says, I can borrow now. Borrow what? I borrow a 10. The 10 and the 2, remember, is a 12. And because he has lent something, he becomes a 9. Now watch this. 12 minus 4 is equal to 8. 9 minus 5 is equal to 4. And 8 minus 5 is equal to a 3. And this, in a nutshell, is your subtraction. All of this looks quite untidy, but ensure that you do this very lightly in pencil so you can understand how you go about doing it. Thank you.